Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Overseers. I'm Proelios, joined as usual by my co host Nightwing, and this is our team preview of the Paris Eternal going into Season 5 of the Overwatch League. As usual, let's kick things off by reviewing Paris's tank line, which consists of Daan and Vestola. Now, I would just like to ask you to go first, Nightwing. What do you think of Daan as a tank for this team?
I think down last year was a bit of an up and down situation, but overall, I'd probably not put him too high up, to be honest. I think they did have, some like bright spots with Dan last year, but there were many, many times where I was just completely questioning what Dan was doing, and often he would be sometimes the worst player on the team. uh, and it would be like very clear as a spectator as well as like based off of stats that he was just not doing his job. There was a few times in the sort of ball-based comps that they would play with Naga on the echo, Daan on the ball. That's where he could really make it work. But on basically every other main tank, I didn't really see exceptional promise from him, and I think that's what's going to continue into this upcoming season as well. It's not like he was the hottest item on the free market, like free agent market, even when he was a contenders player. So it's not like it's somebody else's decisions that are really holding his potential back, I feel, because they had a good coaching structure last year with Get Amazed. The team had good morale, and I still did not see Dan perform exceptionally well. So, considering that every other team seems to have leveled up, I think it will be hard for Dan to keep up.
On relative terms, I definitely agree with you, Nightwing. But all in all, I feel like Dan is still a really good main tank. Um, I think he showcased a fair bit of flexibility on almost all the main tank heroes and played all of them to a fairly good level. And not only that, he also proved to be a leadership figure, as shown by one of the clips, if you remember, which Avala uploaded on Twitter, in which he called for an impromptu comp swap to counter the Dallas Fuel, I think, on Nepal, which won them the map. It wasn't at all part of their plan, as dictated by Get Amazed, but he just saw an opening and he went for it, and his team could capitalize on it. So his team seems to trust him as well, and that's a great bonus going into Overwatch 2, especially where he's going to be a solo tank. So I think on absolute terms, I'm still thinking positively about him. Uh, Maybe he doesn't stack up to the other tanks, but we'll just have to wait and watch because I do think he's got a fair bit of potential in him, although he isn't at those top tiers of play. Um, I'll just quickly touch upon Vestola as well, who I believe had some good showings on Diva last year, and overall had pretty good positioning and understood her fundamentals really well. So he should be able to put up some decent performances, but I'm not sure how well he'll do as a solo tank, especially considering that his only kind of standout hero was Diva. So I don't know too much about his flexibility. So I think he'll be a league average main tank at best. Sorry, league average tank at best. What are your thoughts on Vestola?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to respect Vestola for giving a fresh sort of second wind to the Paris Eternal last year after they had to change their off tank. Uh, and he fit into the team pretty easily, and he did bring the team to a new level of play that was a little bit better than what they were doing previously. uh, that is what you can credit him for, but I don't see him being exceptionally good uh, in the NA region. I think there's lots of tanks that are competing with him. That said, I think the heroes that he is good at, he's pretty decent at, like the Diva and even the Sigma, uh, was pretty good to see from him. However, we didn't really see the Zarya out of him. We haven't seen other heroes because he has had a very short-lived career in the Overwatch League. So you haven't seen heroes like Hog or Zarya or him swapping to any other classically main tank role either. So I think that's something that remains to be proven. But I wouldn't hedge my bets on something that's unproven in this particular sense, just because you've seen the other gameplay from Vestola, and it's all right. I mean, it's nothing exceptional, but it's definitely doable. And I think the good news for the Paris Eternal is that some teams, even though they might have some tanks that on an individual level are better, I think this tank line is generally pretty well balanced. Even if there are some gaps where I'm not sure how well Daan would do on certain main tanks, and I don't know how well Vestola would do on some off tanks. That said, them just having two tanks is putting them in a more comfortable situation than probably the SF Shock, who only have Coluge right now, right? Um, so in that sense, I guess it's good that they've kept these two tanks, and they fit alongside JMAC quite well, because JMAC was the assistant coach last year, so he should work well with them. So in that sense, it's a decent tank line, but there's definitely a few holes, a few gaps in the armor that probably need to be looked at.
Yeah, all in all, I feel it's a pretty good tank line. I don't see any major carry potential in there, but it's a reliable set of players to go into the next season with. And that said, let's move on to the DPS line. Just two players for Paris this time, which are Naga and Glister. Now, I want to quickly talk about Naga first, who is their flex DPS player. And last year he had consistent showings on a number of heroes. And before he joined the league, I'd watched a fair bit of his gameplay and was high on his Echo and May especially. But he also had a very impressive and aggressive Pharah. He didn't play a ton of her, but in the little that he played, I saw that he would really go hard into enemy backlines with Dridro pocketing him on Mercy, and they would just decimate them. You know, and I think Naga will be quite competitive going into Overwatch 2 because of his flexibility and high level of play within these certain heroes that he's already, proven his skill level on. So I don't think he's going to be at the topmost level of DPS play, but I don't think he's someone to ignore either. I think you can share thoughts as well.
I think that brief stint that the Paris Eternal had with Naga on the Echo was probably the best look that they had. And that's a good sign, because I think he was kind of the forefront of that comp. Whenever he, like you said, whenever he swapped off to the Farah, he looked good there. And he's generally shown a pretty good prowess on basically every projectile hero. And here and there, he can swap off to a passable tracer, even though if it's nothing to write home about. And yeah, I think he's a pretty solid player. He's probably one of the better players on the roster. Um, and I think if you're looking for carry plays, it'll probably be between him and potentially Kaan to make those hero plays throughout the course of the game.
hmm And do you also want to tell us about Glister, who's coming into this team from the SF Shock?
Yeah, so Glister, I think, uh, is a bit of a funny situation, because uh, he comes in from the SF Shock not having had a great season there. He's had to last year fill up the shoes of a striker having left the team, and he wasn't able to do that very successfully. I think you've seen that he was sort of the carry player back on the London Spitfire in season 3, but even when given a slightly better team structure in the SF Shock last year, despite all the problems, he wasn't able to get that much done. So I think it's probably time to stop considering him a rookie by any means. And he's basically a veteran of the Overwatch League at this point, but he hasn't shown any exceptional performance. Hopefully that changes in Overwatch 2, but I don't know. I mean, he has shown some degree of flexibility, or at least attempted to be flexible, but it hasn't ever really worked out very well for him. Uh, you've seen him go to the Doomfist at times as well, but it hasn't been anything exceptional. I think there's just probably this is another opportunity for Glister to try and prove himself. I think he's going to find it hard, just because the rest of the team will probably be speaking English. He's not on a full Korean roster, so it's a tough climb up for Glister, I feel. But hopefully he can integrate into the team well, especially since JMAC obviously knows him quite well, so maybe that will help.
Yeah, all in all, I agree. Like, Glister has never impressed me so far. He's always been one to have some good moments here and there in the Overwatch League, but has never been a consistent or a bombastic performer, which is what he was hyped up to be by a lot of people. Like, a lot of analysts are still on the Glister hype train, like they always have been, and I really don't get why. Maybe it's just me, or maybe it's just us. I don't think he's horrendous, but I've seen way better hitscan talent now, like in terms of consistency, raw mechanical aim, uh, flexibility. Like, I mean, good flexibility, not just the ability to like just pick a hero and then just play them to some mediocre level, but to actually be able to pop off on like 3 to 4 different heroes. So I'm not too excited about this pickup. I think it kind of, I believe it's a downgrade from Onigod, to be honest, because Onigod at least had some really good performances on Tracer and Ash, and he was consistent, unlike Glister, who's just not been having those consistent performances. But maybe that changes when he gets a starting spot. Um, like, although he wasn't even that good when he played on London, and he had a starting spot there as well. So it just remains to be seen how effective this pickup is going to be. But I'm not gonna, have the Glister hopium going on here.
Yeah, I
And
think one thing I do want to mention is that last year Glister did have some problems with his nerves in terms of him just feeling very pressured, both in stepping into striker's role as well as playing for the SF Shock. It seemed like uh, he would sort of like bench himself almost just because he was not able to get into that right mindset. Hopefully, coming into the Paris Eternal, he has less of that sort of anxiety. He's working with JMAC, who is already known from the London Spitfire earlier. He's got Avala, who is also a good, GM to work with. So hopefully they can create a comfortable environment for him to prosper as an Overwatch League player. Because obviously, struggling with mental health and anxiety, and also running insane hours for your career as a pro gamer is extremely hard. So in case they've been able to make that shift to a more positive working environment for the Glister, I think you may still see an unexpected side of him and still see further improvement for him. But so far I don't have any evidence to believe that outright. I think that's something that's going to have to be proven in his play and proven through the course of the 2022 season.
okay, yeah, those are some good points over there. And I think in general, Paris has a pretty, I guess, friendly slash player friendly management. So, especially with Avala in there, who just seems like the sort of person who would care for all of the players, as she has kind of shown even through her posts on social media, I think he's in good hands. And, yep, I think let's move on to the support line then, which is the same as last year with Dridro and Kaan. And let me just talk about Dridro first here, who I believe is kind of an all-rounder in main support play. He had consistent showings last year, and like you could see that as soon as he replaced Neptuno on the team, you could see a visible difference in all the players' coordination. So he seems to be a really vocal player, and is probably second in command after Daan when it comes to shot calling. So, and even though he's not top tier, I think he's still quite skilled and isn't one to be overlooked. What do you think of him, Nightwing?
So for Dridro, I'm not really sure Um, if I'm too high on him. I think he did an okay job. I think it's difficult to get noticed on main support, so that's something I will give him the benefit of the doubt for. I do think that the team worked together better with him than they did with Neptuno, which is uh, still saying something despite how slightly washed Neptuno got over time. I mean, Neptuno has been a veteran of the league for since the beginning, really. I think he was the player that played the most maps by far in season one as well. So, in that sense, Dridro outperforming him is still an achievement. And he's young talent. He should be able to keep up with Overwatch 2. Um, I think I haven't seen an exceptional brig from him as far as I can remember in the 2021 season. I think he is going to have to step his mechanics with Brig and just his shot calling and rotation calling with Lucio as well, to keep up with some of the new rookie talent being added. But despite that, I think he's done well for him so far. Um, but he is going to have to prove himself to be of that next sort of tier of caliber, right? I don't think he's quite there yet.
I believe though you are way higher on Khan than you are on Dridro. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, I think Kaan was probably one of the best like flex support rookie prospects we had last year, maybe even the best. And I think definitely the most surprising because I don't think people expected too much out of him, or at least I didn't hear too many rumblings. And then obviously once he does show up, everyone comes out of the woods and says, I wrote this tweet at this time about Khan and how he seemed good, but there wasn't a lot of chatter about him in the preseason last year. But once he did show up, he was insane. And I think he played really, really well and was probably the best like part of the Paris Eternal last year. I think even better than Naga. Uh, and I think that will continue into this year. He's very mechanically skilled, uh, up there with some of the best in terms of that mechanical skill, I believe. Uh, Even if he's not quite there with the game sense as like some of our absolute goats for flex support. Um, I think he showed great promise on the BAP and Ana, especially. His Zen wasn't played too much, but when he did, that looked good as well. I think if any new flex support heroes are added, especially ones that rely on a lot of mechanical skill, I think Khan will be right there to pick it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you covered most of it, Nightwing. Even I think like Khan really lived up to the hype last year. Because I was definitely super excited to see him in Tier 1 after watching his play in Contenders. Uh, so he's a really strong and fairly flexible player. So I'm sure that he'll do very well for himself in Overwatch too. And I think let's move on and talk about the coaching staff, right? With JMAC now being at the helm. And now that he's finally in the head coach position, he is going to have a lot more control over the team. And so far, he has been praised a lot as a hard worker and a strategist. And with like Avala to help him as a manager and translator, he should be able to communicate his ideas effectively to his players. But I will say it's always a learning curve to get from the assistant coach to the head coach position. So there will be growing pains involved. But I think he'll be okay overall, considering that he's earned a lot of respect from his team and the Overwatch League community in general. So he just needs to keep it simple, keep it straightforward, and I think he'll do an okay job. With these pieces, I don't think it's going to be like, you know, they're not going to be a top team, but I still think he can do a decent job with them. What are your thoughts on JMAC Nightwing?
I think JMAC knowing players like Glister should help him. That said, I don't really see him as someone that's seen or tasted the taste of victory too often. And I think it's his first time stepping into the head coach role in the on the Overwatch League stage, as he was assistant coach earlier. The responsibilities you have are different. It's not just about your analysis. It's not just about how you provide, comp instruction to the teams or how you make them scrim. It's also about how you know, put players in and out, how you keep their morale up. And I think, especially like I mentioned with Glister, that's something that the JMAC's probably going to have to work on. Um, just because I do genuinely think that Glister might be a little unstable, like a piece to work with. So I think there's still a big challenge ahead of JMAC to show himself, uh, to be able to lead this team successfully. I think, given the right circumstances, he can make this team punch above their weight, and contend for spots in those tournaments. Maybe not, reaching those finals, but at least trying for the semifinals or playoffs or play-ins. I think that's where he can take the Paris Eternal to if he's got a good shoulder on his heads, uh, a good head on his shoulders.
Yikes, man!
Wow.
What
Okay.
what kind of anatomy class did you attend?
I think I'm just trying to sell shampoo at this point. Uh, but
Yeah.
yeah,
All right.
I do think that JMAC has his work cut out for him. Definitely, it's not going to be a cakewalk by any means.
Yeah, and he's just got one assistant coach to help him out in Mobugi, who is a Korean coach coming in from Team BM, which played in Contenders Korea. And honestly, I don't really know anything about him, so I can't really comment on him. So anything you want to talk about Mobugi Nightwing?
I think it's hard to talk about Mobugi since he uh, most recently worked with Team BM, who came fourth out of 8 teams in Contenders Korea. Uh, he did work with some other players that have been signed to the Overwatch League, so, but I don't really know what exact hand he had in developing those players. Uh, as usual, as an English-speaking person, it's hard to really know what goes on in coaching in the sort of Contenders Korea region. So I think we'll just have to see what this season holds for his level of coaching. We'll have to watch closely as the Parasite Eternal try to figure out the meta, try to figure out what comps work well for their players. And I think Mobugi is going to have to play a big part in that alongside JMAC, of course, because those are the only two coaches they have. So again, work cut out for him. He's going to have to prove himself to be a capable coach because he does not have an exceptional amount of tier one sort of experience under his belt.
Hmm. And all in all, with these players, Nightwing, what do you think of this lineup in general? Because what mainly concerns me is that they don't have any backups on DPS and support. They do have Daan and Vestola covering the tanks, like they'll just be fielded one at a time. But I feel like the team might lack a little bit of flexibility, as well as some pop-off potential on the DPS role. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think this team is going to struggle against basically every NA team. I don't think it's going to be an easy battle against literally any NA team against them. I think on any given day, they're going to get beaten by obviously the Atlanta Rains and the LA Gladiators of the world, but they're going to have a tough time against Florida. They're going to have a tough time probably even against Vancouver. I could see Vancouver snatching a few wins away from them. Um, I don't think there's a single match I would just give to the Paris Eternal without a heavy fight. And that means I'll probably have to place them below average in the NA region and below average overall as well. Um, because the Asia region, especially, is also incredibly strong. So I think hopefully they prove me wrong and they're able to, snatch easy wins against some of these lower seeded teams. But I do generally think that there's a lot of potential for this team to just not work out as well as they've planned. And even if it does work out as well as they've planned, it's not going to be that good. I think they do have an advantage over some teams that are foolishly not adding a second tank player. Uh, Wink, wink, SF Shock. Please add another player. Um, but yeah, I think it's a definitely an uphill battle for the Paris Eternal.
Yeah, I would tend to agree over here. My main point of concern with the Eternal is the DPS line because they do have some okay talent in here with Naga and Glister, but they neither have like a consistent hit scan player, nor do they have someone known for their pop off potential, which concerns me because as a team you have to have at least one of these. You either need to have consistency or you need to have pop off potential. If you have both, you're probably like a top five team overall, right? So it I think a lot of this hinges on whether Glister sorts out his kind of motivational issues, um, gets his communication set up properly, since he's going to be on an English speaking roster. And it all also depends on how well JMAC settles in into this head coach position, which he hasn't ever been in before, right? So, all in all, I think this team is all right. They might be able to grab some wins against some weaker teams in NA, like Nightwing said, but I'm not expecting them to, qualify for playoffs or go deep or anything like that. So, yeah. Any final thoughts, Nightwing, or can we close things here?
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much it. I think it's just not very great news for any Paris fans out there. Um, they're going to have to work very hard uh, to gain even an inch when other teams take a mile from them. And I think that's probably going to be their story for this season.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, we are going to end this episode. Thanks very much for watching so far. Do remember to join our Discord in case you are an Overwatch League fan, because we have a lot of discussions during the season. We do live watch parties, it's a lot of fun. And also leave a like on the video in case you like our content. We really appreciate it. So thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next team preview, which will be about the Florida Mayhem. Bye bye.